When we talk about attraction, most people think of it as something external, something we do to make someone else feel drawn to us. But in reality, attraction is not about trying harder to win someone over. It's about being a person who naturally pulls others in. And that starts with one crucial shift, taking the focus off him and placing it back onto yourself. The moment you shift your energy away from trying to get him back, you take back your power. This isn't about ignoring him or playing hard to get. It's about understanding that attraction is strongest when it isn't forced, when it stems from an inner confidence, a self-assured presence that doesn't need validation. The problem most people face when they try to re-attract someone is that their energy is desperate. It's focused on lack. How do I make him miss me? How do I remind him of what we had? But the truth is, when you fixate on someone who has pulled away, you make yourself smaller in the process. You become reactive instead of proactive. And nothing is less attractive than a person whose energy is chasing instead of leading. Think about the people in your life who captivate you the most. They aren't the ones constantly seeking attention. They are the ones who are so engaged in their own life, so deeply connected to their purpose, that you want to be around them. Their energy is magnetic, not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because they exude something rare, self-contentment. Now apply that to your situation. If he has pulled away, if he seems less engaged, if you feel like you've lost the dynamic you once had, the worst thing you can do is center your energy around him. Instead, shift the focus back to you. So what does that actually look like? It looks like reconnecting with the things that made you feel alive before you ever met him. It looks like investing in your personal growth, your fitness, your passions. It looks like reminding yourself that your life was fulfilling before he was in it. And here's the fascinating part. The moment you stop making him the center of your emotional world, he starts to feel that shift. He starts to notice that the version of you who once seemed so available, so eager, is now moving differently. Human psychology tells us that we are drawn to what feels valuable, what feels just out of reach. And this is not about manipulation. It's about understanding a fundamental truth of attraction. When something is too readily available, it's taken for granted. And when something is scarce, when it holds its own, when it isn't dependent on someone else for its sense of worth, it becomes infinitely more desirable. The reason this works is because it's not an act. It's a genuine shift in how you operate. If you do this with the goal of getting a reaction out of him, it won't have the same effect because deep down you'll still be seeking validation. The key is to genuinely pour into yourself, not to make him jealous, not to make him regret losing you, but because you deserve it. There's a powerful concept in psychology called the scarcity principle. It's the idea that we assign greater value to things that are rare or difficult to obtain. Think about an exclusive event, a limited edition product, a person who seems effortlessly confident and independent. They don't beg for attention. Their presence alone commands it. Now ask yourself, which version of you holds more value? The one who is waiting, hoping, overanalyzing, or the one who is living fully, moving forward, radiating an energy that makes people want to be around you? Because here's the paradox. The more you try to prove your worth to someone, the less they feel it. The moment you stop proving and start simply being is the moment they feel the shift. If you really want to re-attract someone, the first and most important step is to become the best, most fulfilled version of yourself without them. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about yourself than about convincing someone to choose you. And ironically, that's what makes people want to choose you. So if you're sitting there wondering, how do I make him regret pulling away? How do I make him feel what I'm feeling? The answer isn't in a text message. It isn't in waiting for his attention. It's in shifting your focus inward. Because when you do that, when you truly embody confidence, fulfillment, and self-worth, you won't need to chase anyone. They will feel the difference. And that's when they start coming to you. You can't force someone to see your value, but you can make it impossible for them to ignore it. One of the most powerful shifts you can make when trying to re-attract someone without chasing them is learning to communicate in a way that triggers intrigue rather than pressure. Most people make the mistake of thinking that attraction is about constant validation, about proving their worth, reminding the other person what they're missing, or making it clear how much they care. But true attraction isn't built through words alone. It's built through emotional experience. It's about how you make someone feel when they interact with you. Now, here's where most people go wrong. When they feel someone pulling away, their instinct is to close the gap. They try to remind the other person of what they had. They over-explain, they over-text. They try to recreate the closeness that once existed. But in doing so, they actually create more distance. Because when you try to force an emotional connection before someone is ready to feel it again, it doesn't draw them in, it repels them. Think about the last time someone tried too hard to win you over. Maybe it was a friend who kept reaching out even when you weren't in the mood to talk. Maybe it was a date who seemed overly invested before you had even made up your mind about them. How did that make you feel? Probably a little pressured, a little resistant, maybe even a little annoyed. That's because human nature resists anything that feels forced. So if you want to re-attract someone, you have to resist that urge. You have to stop trying to recreate what once was and instead focus on creating a new emotional experience, one that naturally draws them in without making them feel obligated to respond. The key to doing this? Learning the art of subtlety. Instead of forcing connection, you plant seeds of curiosity. You make them feel something, not by pushing, but by being just intriguing enough to make them want to reach out. How does this play out in real life? Imagine you run into this person or you exchange a brief message. Instead of saying something that sounds like an emotional plea like, "I miss you. Do you ever think about what we had?" You say something that sparks curiosity, something playful, something that gives them just enough to feel intrigued, but not enough to feel certain. For example, let's say you're texting. Instead of sending a long emotional message, you say something like, "You'll never believe what just reminded me of you." And then you pause. You wait for them to ask, "What was it?" Now, instead of chasing, you've flipped the dynamic. They're leaning in. They're engaging with you. And when you finally respond, you keep it light. Maybe it's an inside joke. Maybe it's something funny. But the key is you're not dumping emotions onto them. You're simply creating a moment, a micro interaction that reminds them of the feeling of being around you. Because here's the truth. What people miss about someone isn't just their presence. It's how they made them feel. It's the way they laughed, the way they created excitement, the way they had a certain unpredictability that kept things interesting. And that's what you want to reintroduce, not through effort, but through energy. A great way to understand this is to think about movies. What makes a story compelling? It's not when everything is predictable, when all the emotions are handed to you on a silver platter. It's the tension, the build-up, the moments of curiosity that make you lean in. That's how attraction works too. If someone already knows exactly how you feel, exactly what you're thinking, and exactly where they stand with you, there's no intrigue. But if you create a little space, if you give them just enough to wonder, to question, to remember, that's when their mind starts filling in the blanks. Now, let's be clear, this isn't about playing games. It's about understanding human psychology. People value what they have to invest in. When they feel like they're earning your attention, when they feel like they're getting glimpses of something exciting, but not all at once, they naturally become more engaged. That's just how our brains are wired. And the best part? When you communicate in this way, not out of neediness, but out of confidence, you begin to enjoy the process. You stop feeling like you're anxiously waiting for a response. Instead, you start to see attraction as something you control. Because when you are no longer giving everything away, when you are no longer over-explaining or over-proving, you create space for the other person to feel that pull toward you. So if you want to re-attract him without chasing, remember this: less is more. The less pressure you put on the interaction, the more freely attraction can grow. The less you try to convince, the more they will start to wonder. And the moment someone starts wondering about you, again, that's when you've already won half the battle. Attraction isn't about proving your worth. It's about knowing your worth so deeply that you become someone worth pursuing. And when you master that, when you start leading with confidence instead of desperation, people will feel the difference and they will come to you. One of the most misunderstood aspects of attraction is the idea that you have to do something to make someone want you again. People think they have to send the perfect text, wear the perfect outfit, or create the perfect scenario to spark desire. But real attraction, the kind that lasts, doesn't come from external actions alone. It comes from energy, from how you carry yourself, from the subtle shifts in your presence that make someone look at you differently without even realizing why. And here's the paradox. The more you try to re-attract someone by proving yourself to them, the more they take you for granted. The moment someone senses that you're seeking their approval or waiting on their response, they unconsciously categorize you as someone who is chasing them rather than someone they should be pursuing. This is where most people get stuck. They think that if they just put in more effort, if they just show their value, the other person will wake up and realize what they lost. But that's not how attraction works. Attraction isn't created through effort. It's created through space. It's created through the moments when someone realizes they are missing you. Not because you told them to, but because you became someone worth missing. This is why the key to re-attracting someone without chasing is to shift your focus away from them entirely. Instead of trying to pull them back into your orbit, you make your orbit so strong, so vibrant, and so compelling that they start gravitating toward you. Think about it like this. People are drawn to energy, not just physical energy, but emotional energy. The kind that comes from passion, confidence, and a deep sense of self-worth. When you are fixated on someone who isn't giving you what you deserve, you are leaking that energy. You are investing it into thoughts, worries, and anxieties about how to get their attention, rather than into the things that actually make you magnetic. But the moment you shift, the moment you redirect that energy into yourself, everything changes. Now let's break this down practically. What does it mean to redirect your energy? It means pouring your attention into areas of your life that make you glow. Your passions, your personal growth, your friendships, your health, your purpose. It means becoming so engaged in your own world that you stop feeling the need to check if they are watching. Because here's what happens when you do this. You stop operating from a place of lack and start operating from a place of abundance. You go from being someone who is waiting on someone else's validation to being someone who is already fulfilled. And people feel that. They sense when you are radiating confidence rather than seeking reassurance. And this is where the real magic happens. When someone sees that you are thriving without them, it forces them to reconsider their perception of you. Because the version of you they had in their mind, the one who is seeking their attention, is no longer the version of you that exists. Now they are confronted with something unexpected. Intrigue. Why? Because humans are naturally wired to desire what feels just out of reach. The moment you become less available, less focused on them, and more focused on your life, you create scarcity. And scarcity is powerful. It makes people reassess what they once took for granted. This is why the most attractive people aren't necessarily the ones who are the most physically perfect or the most available. They are the ones who exude a sense of independence, excitement, and purpose. They are the ones who make you feel like if you don't act fast, you might just lose them to something greater. And this is the exact energy you want to embody. Not through pretense, not through manipulation, but through genuine self-investment. Now, some people hear this and think, so, I just ignore them? No, this isn't about playing games or pretending you don't care. It's about actually caring less. It's about realizing that your worth isn't dependent on whether or not they see it. And ironically, when you start living that truth, that's when they start to see it more than ever. Because here's the truth. Nothing is more attractive than someone who knows their value and refuses to settle for less than they deserve. Nothing makes someone regret losing you faster than realizing that you're not sitting around waiting for them. You're too busy being the kind of person they now wish they could have. So if you want to re-attract him without chasing, stop chasing. Stop trying to make him realize anything. Instead, shift all of that energy inward. Focus on becoming the version of yourself that is too radiant to ignore. Because when you do, you won't just make him regret losing you. You'll make everyone around you take notice. And suddenly it won't be about whether he wants you back. It'll be about whether you even want him anymore. One of the biggest mistakes people make when trying to re-attract someone is thinking that the answer lies in external gestures, sending the right text, looking a certain way, or acting in a way that they believe will elicit a specific reaction. But true attraction isn't built through performance. It's built through presence. It's about how you make someone feel when they're around you, and even more importantly, how they feel when you're not. And one of the most overlooked aspects of re-attraction is the power of mystery. Not mystery in the sense of playing games, but in the sense of being unpredictable, of not always being available, of having a life that exists beyond them, of being a person who is constantly evolving. Think about it. Why do we find certain things irresistible? Why does the beginning of a relationship feel so electric? It's because there is a sense of discovery, an element of the unknown. You don't know what the other person is going to do next, what their next move will be, or what part of them you will uncover. That curiosity is intoxicating. It pulls people in. But here's what often happens. As soon as we get attached to someone, we start becoming predictable. We fall into patterns. We become overly available. And worst of all, we stop being a source of excitement and challenge. And the moment that happens, we stop being chosen and start becoming assumed. This is why mystery is so powerful in re-attraction. When someone expects you to respond instantly and you don't, they start wondering. When they assume they know everything about you and then they realize there are parts of your life they don't have access to, they start paying attention again. When they thought they had you all figured out and then suddenly they don't, that's when desire kicks in. Now let's be clear, this isn't about manipulation. It's not about making someone feel insecure or playing mind games. It's about genuinely having a life that is so rich and fulfilling that it naturally creates an air of unpredictability. When was the last time you did something purely for yourself? When was the last time you made a decision that had nothing to do with them? Something that added excitement to your own life? Because the more you cultivate your own world, the more intriguing you become. Mystery isn't about withholding. It's about expanding. Expanding your interests, your experiences, your conversations. It's about becoming someone who isn't static. Someone who has layers, who is always growing, who has passions and stories that aren't centered around one person. And here's the magic of it. When you become this kind of person, you don't have to chase. You don't have to send that desperate text or try to force a reaction. You simply are someone worth thinking about. Someone who lingers in their mind even when you're not around. Imagine this. You stop responding immediately, not because you're trying to play hard to get, but because you're actually busy, engaged in your own life. You stop posting things meant to get their attention, and instead you start doing things that excite you. You become less available, not as a strategy, but as a byproduct of the fact that you are now prioritizing your joy, your experiences, your growth. And suddenly they start noticing. They wonder what you're up to. They start paying closer attention. They begin to question whether they really had you in the way they once assumed. And that's when the shift happens. Because here's the truth. People don't crave what they already have. They crave what they feel they could lose. When you create mystery, not by pretending, but by genuinely living a life that doesn't revolve around them, you become someone who is constantly discovered, not someone who is assumed. And that is what keeps people coming back. So if you want to re-attract him without chasing, stop being predictable. Stop making it easy for him to take you for granted. Start becoming the version of yourself that is always evolving, always surprising, always expanding. Not because you want to get his attention, but because you deserve to be the kind of person who is endlessly fascinating to him, yes, but more importantly to yourself. One of the biggest misconceptions people have when trying to re-attract someone is the belief that they need to convince the other person to want them again. That if they just say the right thing, look a certain way, or prove their worth, everything will shift. But attraction doesn't work like that. It's not logical. It's emotional. It's not something you talk someone into. It's something they feel on a deep, almost instinctual level. And here's the key. The moment someone senses that they have you completely, without effort, without uncertainty, without any fear of losing you, they stop feeling the urgency to act. Because why would they? There's no tension, no contrast, no reason for them to question their position in your life. This is why one of the most powerful things you can do to re-attract him without chasing is to create emotional contrast, to subtly shift the dynamic so that he no longer feels the comfort of certainty, but instead begins to sense the possibility of loss, not because you're playing games, but because you are genuinely reclaiming your own sense of value. Let's break this down. Think about what makes people nostalgic. What makes them crave something they once had? It's never the availability of that thing. It's the absence. It's the realization that something they took for granted is no longer guaranteed. And when that realization hits, it triggers one of the most powerful psychological forces in human nature: loss aversion. People will fight harder to avoid losing something valuable than they ever will to gain something new. This is why when you pull your energy back, not with resentment, not with drama, but with quiet self-respect, it creates a shift. It forces the other person to confront the possibility that what they once assumed would always be there might not be. Now, this is where most people go wrong. They think pulling back means ignoring texts, waiting a certain number of hours before responding, or trying to make someone jealous. But those tactics only work in the short term, and they often backfire because they come from insecurity, not power. True emotional contrast isn't about manipulation. It's about making an internal shift that naturally changes how you show up. It's about no longer making them the center of your world. It's about engaging in your own life so deeply that your absence is felt without you having to force it. Because here's the truth. The people who are the hardest to forget are the ones who leave gaps in our lives when they're gone. The ones who had presence, who brought something unique to the table, who made us feel something real. And if you want to re-attract him, your goal isn't to remind him of your worth. It's to make him feel the contrast between having you fully engaged in his life and what it's like without that energy. So how do you do that? You start by changing your default response patterns. If you've been over-explaining, justifying, or seeking validation, stop. If you've been available at the drop of a hat, pause. If you've been bending over backward to accommodate his needs while ignoring your own, shift. Not to punish him, not to make him chase, but to rebalance the equation. Because when you stop over-giving, stop over-explaining, stop proving yourself, something powerful happens. Space is created, and in that space, he starts to wonder, he starts to reflect, he starts to feel the shift. And that feeling is what makes someone reevaluate, what makes them second guess their decisions, what makes them start to miss what they once had. The key here is consistency. You can't do this for a day or two and expect a transformation. You have to truly embody it. You have to live in a way that shows, not tells, but shows that your world does not revolve around whether or not he is paying attention. And here's the paradox. The less you try to make someone feel your worth, the more they start to recognize it. The less you chase, the more they lean in. The less predictable you are, the more interesting you become. So if you want to re-attract him without chasing, shift the balance. Let him feel your absence in a way that makes him realize your presence was never something to take for granted. And in that realization, you become not someone he once had, but someone he now wants again. One of the most powerful truths about attraction is this: people don't fall for those who chase them, they fall for those who make them chase. But here's where most people misunderstand this dynamic. They think making him chase means playing hard to get, being distant, or using mind games. But true attraction, the kind that pulls someone back in without force, doesn't come from external tactics. It comes from internal shifts. It comes from the energy you exude when you're no longer seeking approval, validation, or a certain outcome. If you want to re-attract him without chasing, you have to embody a mindset of genuine detachment from the result. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you don't need a specific reaction from him to feel good about yourself. And ironically, it's this very energy, this feeling of I'm good with or without you, that makes you magnetic. Think about it. We are naturally drawn to what feels valuable, and what determines value? Scarcity. Not in a fake manipulative way, but in the sense that something is not easily replaced. When someone senses that you are emotionally dependent on them, that you are waiting for them to validate your worth, they subconsciously register that as low value, because something that needs to be chosen is never as desirable as something that is chosen freely. Now let's get practical. How do you shift into this mindset of true emotional independence? You do it by prioritizing yourself, not as a strategy, but as a lifestyle. You stop waiting for someone to notice you and start making yourself impossible to ignore. You stop trying to prove your worth and start living in a way that shows you already know it. The key to this is momentum. When we're fixated on someone, when we're waiting for a text, when we're analyzing their every move, what we're really doing is standing still. We're placing our emotional energy on hold, waiting for them to make a move before we decide how to feel. But this is the fastest way to lose attraction, because nothing is more unappealing than someone who has put their life on pause for another person. Instead of pausing, create forward motion. Fill your days with things that light you up. Engage in conversations that have nothing to do with him. Make plans that excite you. Not to make him jealous, not to prove a point, but because you deserve a life that is full, whether he is in it or not. And here's what happens when you do this. When you shift your energy away from him and toward your own growth, he feels it. He may not be able to articulate it, but on a gut level, he will sense that something is different, that the person who once gave him all their attention, who once made him feel like the center of their world, is now operating on a different frequency. And that feeling, the feeling that he no longer has guaranteed access to you, is what makes him start to pay attention. But here's the real beauty of this approach. The moment you stop needing him to notice, the moment you stop waiting for him to see your worth, you become free. You are no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of seeking validation. And in that freedom, you gain something even more valuable than his attraction. You gain yourself. So if you take away one thing from this, let it be this. You don't win by making him regret losing you. You win by becoming so fulfilled, so engaged in your own life, that whether he comes back or not becomes irrelevant. And ironically, that's the very energy that makes him want to be part of your world again.